The whole thing is discussed in great detail in Science's Context for it, and thanks for listening. We have time for questions and comments. Anybody?
My name is Phelim McAleer. I'm from Greener Horizon Films.
Right, and he's announced himself as the Michael Moore of the right. Just so you know. The Michael Moore of the right.
Thank you for that.
I have to frame it. It's your words.
Actually, you're misquoting. I never said that.
It's on the web for what that's worth.
So you go with what's on the websites?
Sometimes.
Okay. Okay.
Please, I interrupted you.
Yes, you did. Yes, you did. What do you think of the behaviour of Professor Phil Jones in asking colleagues to delete emails and the destruction of publicly funded data which was gathered by public funds?
I don't know what he asked, what he said. I don't make comments on redacted emails presented to me by people whose values I don't trust. I would have to see the whole thing, so I cannot very well comment. What I can say is that private communications that people have between each other certainly are not public documents. And
but the university has confirmed they are accurate.
Everybody says privately. Well, now I agree. We'll make it short.
Sorry, I just want to correct you. The university has said that the emails are accurate. So I'm asking you, given that those emails have been confirmed, that Professor Phil Jones has asked colleagues to delete data, delete emails, and delete publicly funded scientific data.
I don't know about deleting publicly funded scientific data unless it's wrong. Every single scientist collects data. Sometimes the data is wrong. You have errors in measurements. I wouldn't put that out. And the other thing is scientists, okay, I'll just finish answering this question. Scientists are a very, very open community. They really dislike advocacy.
Deleting of data. Do you approve of that?
No, I don't approve of deleting of data that is used in analyses that you know to be correct. I would certainly delete. I delete data all the time when my computer runs when I've made a mistake. So I would have to hear from them the full context to know what's going on. And the fact that an individual email is correct does not mean it's correct in the context of 100 emails that may have written saying other things. So the fact that somebody puts on a website a whole email doesn't mean you've given the context unless every email's up there and you can read them all.
So you approve of deleting data?
I do not approve of deleting data. It depends upon the circumstances. There's no general statement that can be made here. Okay, there was another question. By the way, one more thing. I also don't approve of partial quotes, as your website did on me. Thank you.
Well, I don't approve of Stanford sending solicitors' letters silencing journalists, which is what Professor Schneider did. We interviewed him, and when I asked him awkward questions, he got Stanford University to send me a legal letter to my documentary.
And that's because your people lie by telling me...
They did not lie. You gave an interview, and when the interview didn't go your way, you said you used Stanford's legal. This is the debate.
I have done about 3,500 interviews in my life, and only twice in my life have I pulled the plug on somebody when I became convinced that it was a trap, a trick, and disingenuous. And that's the message you conveyed when you tried 10 times at the end to get me to say something negative about Al Gore. And I told you, I can't say that without you giving me the full quote. You never gave me the full quote, and it was completely obvious it was a setup. And if I had a legal way to pull the plug on you, who I don't trust for a second, I did. And I'd do it again. Because you, I don't believe to be a fair and balanced journalist. And the bit that your group put on about me, talking about warming versus cooling, I had a 7-minute interview. By the way, it's recorded. One of my students, unknown to me, recorded it. We have a 7-minute segment where I explain in detail how that warming and cooling incident, and what does he put on it? Then I'm a flip-flop. That's the kind of journalist this guy is. He's an Ivy League. Next. Can't answer it because it's true. Next. I'm sorry, you don't get equal time. This is you can make plots and you can do movies. please. You've had more than equal time than I do. I've just got 4 minutes. You have a 1-hour movie filled with junk. So let's go on.
My name is Isabel Hilton from China Dialogue.
You notice you're in the minority with people who know something. Yeah.
The latest opinion polls do show a diminution of public understanding and support for climate science. I'm sure we all can see why this is happening.
Indeed.
For the scientific community, however, this is a major challenge to allow people to get people to understand scientific method and the very complicated science that's involved in climate change. Is this something that the scientific community is prepared to tackle, and what new ideas are there, given that we've been discussing this for 30 years and it doesn't seem to be going ahead very fast? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, it is very difficult for the scientific community. We're essentially toilet trained to lead with our caveats. And that's a very, very bad model to try to get out there in a world of advocacy, where most people believe that whoever is advocating a position is only giving them a partial position. In science, if you give a partial position, then you have a serious problem with your reputation. Remember, our promotions, our peer review, grants are often based upon anonymous peer reviews, which are based on your, quote, reputation. So scientists caught, deliberately spinning do not have good reputations. So it's very, very difficult to do that. Therefore, it's hard for them to want to go out in the political world, where in the soundbite world, you're stuck with much less than the kind of comfortable full disclosure you have. The other area where scientists are very uncomfortable is talking about those things which don't have high degree of confidence yet. So this was the difference in Working Group 1 and Working Group 2's projection of sea level. In Working Group 1, they said about a half a meter, asterisk, not including ice sheets. So why did they leave out ice sheets? Because they were melting at a much faster rate than any models predicted, and therefore they said we don't have a really good scientific basis. Working Group 2, which is impacts and adaptation and vulnerability, was driven by the commands from the government to look at risk management, which means you can't leave out high consequence events even when they have unknown probability. So what we had was different philosophies about the degree of information that you have before you go public. And my view is it's a value judgment to decide that by yourselves. That should be decided by the citizens and by the governments and corporations and others. So we're of the philosophy that you put everything in, and when you don't know much, you give it low confidence. And IPCC uses a high, medium, and low confidence scale to do exactly that. So there is discomfort in the scientific community interacting in the real world of advocacy because it's not the model at which they were trained. And then there's also the fact that most of these people make their reputations on the basis of published works and good measurements and so forth, not on the basis of their capacity to have fat synapses at a press conference. So there's a cultural problem as well, and it takes a generation for cultural change. So the scientific community is having a bit of a problem dealing with this, and they're absolutely dumbfounded by the way that some of their work is constantly quoted out of context by spinners on all sides, and they get so disgusted with it that they just walk. And I'm trying to convince them to stay on target. Okay, we have to go. Thank you all for coming. Any member of the press is entitled to a free book, including you. I'll sign them if anyone wants.
Professor Schneider from Stanford University tells the United Nations who can ask questions. Yes. Why did you ask me to drop the camera?
No, I asked you to turn over your back.
And why did you ask us to turn off the camera? Why did you ask us? Who asked you to ask us my badge? Professor Schneider did. The guy who's giving the press conference, he doesn't like me. He doesn't like difficult questions. What's your deal? So this is what Professor Stephen Schneider can ask for cameras to be turned off, and he gets a security clearance.